Yeah. Well, Summer, we'll go ahead and call to order here shortly. We missing Dennis? There we go. I would like to call to order the December 9th, 2024 meeting of Oregon City Council. The time is 7:02 p.m. If you would join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call of council, please?
Mrs. Ackerman. Mr. Drake.
Here.
Mr. Horniak.
Here.
Mrs. Pauloff. Here. Mr. Reeves.
Here.
Mr. Salander.
Here.
Mr. Wallensack.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Ross, and please note all council members are here this evening. Also joining us for this evening's meeting is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Mazer, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Purpura, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Police Chief Brandon Began, Assistant Police Chief Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and Finance Director Nick Roman. Folks, we'll move into the first item in here, which is approval of the minutes from the November 25th, 2024 regular and the December 2nd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 25th, 2024 regular council meeting and the December 2nd, 2024 Committee of the Whole as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake for acceptance of the minutes from the November 25th and December 2nd meetings. Councilor, are there any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted as presented. First item on our list for this evening is persons and delegations. We do have one person signed in to speak, and Mr. Dunaway, will have you come forward? We'll have you say your name and your address for the record, please. And as always, we'll do our typical 3 to 4 minutes. We'll start giving you a wave. All right. I've heard that before out of you.
Steve Dunaway, 24 South Point. Joel, I thought you your paperwork. Okay. Because of a council person making a comment on Facebook about the 911 consolidation, which I know from my research, this council had no options available. When the county said this is what we're going to do, we had to do it. Wood County isn't following those same rules, and one of our local cities, Northwood, has decided to go and stay with local dispatching. Well, because of that comment on Facebook, and I don't think it's accurate, I proceeded to do some research and call people in Columbus, and they led me to this. It's wonderful reading. I mentioned it to Joel this morning when I was in the building. He wasn't quite aware of it. I talked to are you actually the chief for the police? You're the second in command. We were talking in the hallway, and he's aware of this, but it's the cogs at the county that are turning for this. But you're not going to like what it says, but I think it says a lot of very important things. 911 in Ohio is no longer going to be local, and it's no longer going to be county. It's going to be statewide. IP AI run. It's already been decided. January 1st, all funding for the present 911 through the state has been canceled. The state's not going to collect it anymore. The only funding that is going to be available is going to be for this new IP run 911. They're doing it in stages. This is just the start of the plan. And so, yeah, you can be a city and say, I don't want to play, but the players are the ones that control the money, and you're not going to get it. So I thought, I'm going to share this for Joel. He said he would like to read it, but the most important person is I want to make sure Kathleen gets a copy of this. She's my safety councilwoman. Because instead of being blindsided like the county commissioners did it to us the last time, maybe we need to engage with those people over there and see if there's things that they really don't like about it, or what we need to find out about it, or what we think it should be, so we can be prepared as a city when everybody else might not be. So when it comes down the pike, we can get it done right for our citizens. So I brought this for you guys. I'm going to give it to Cassie. You'll see to Kathleen getting a copy. And then you can see about those wonderful people that work for us. You can talk to them, because you're going to find it very interesting reading. Oh, and by the way, this isn't just the state of Ohio. It's already fully implemented in Indiana. It's fully implemented in West Virginia, fully implemented in Pennsylvania. And yes, you get into this a little bit. It's not getting rid of people, but it's computers making sure that the people don't make mistakes. It's all going to be run on AI. Another reason they probably want to build that data center.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pollock.
thank you for that, Mr. Dunaway. I am looking forward to reading that.
It's about 30 pages. And it's real interesting reading. And when you talk to the people on the phone in Columbus, they've made up their mind. This is and it's almost like the state's not pushing it. It's like the feds are pushing this. And it's going to be across the board, all run by computers.
Thank you for that.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Powell. Thank you, Mr. Dunn. We appreciate you bringing that forward. If I noticed on the cover of that, the dating on that was July of 2024, if I see that for that document. If you don't have objection, I'd ask Ms. Rawson to go ahead and share it with all council members. So we have that.
Since Kathleen's
Oh, absolutely.
and she's got people she needs to communicate with, because they might have something to say.
Absolutely.
To make sure that we get with our people downtown. I want our people to go vote it,
Mhm.
so that they can say, this is how it has to work for you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Dunn. We appreciate that. Council, we'll move into our agenda for this evening, and we do have a couple of items to add for the evening. So we do have items 195, 196, and 197 that would have to be added to this evening's agenda. Can I seek a motion to add them?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mrs. Pauloff. Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff. Motion by Mr. Reeves, second by Mrs. Pauloff. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, items 195, 196, and 197 are added to this evening's agenda. Mayor, I'm assuming under 192, 93, 94, the administration's good as presented last week? Very good. First item on our agenda is item 192 of 2024, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. Council, we did talk about 192, 93, and 94 at our committee of the whole meeting last week. Are there any questions or comments on item 192? Hearing none, I will assign item 192 of 2024 as ordinance 192 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, chief of police, and finance director to enter into an agreement with Faro Technologies, 125 Technology Park, Lake Mary, Florida, for the purchase of one Focus Premium 3D scanner to be used by the Oregon Police Division for crash scene and crime scene investigations and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula.
I move for passage of ordinance 192 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mrs. Paula.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Ms. Paula, seconded by Mr. Slander for ordinance 192 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Salander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 192 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 193 of 2024. Council, are there any questions on item 193? Hearing none, I will assign item 193 of 2024 as ordinance 193 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Bauman Ford, Oregon, 2811 Navarre Avenue, Oregon, Ohio, for the purchase of 6 2025 Ford Interceptor utility all-wheel drive base vehicles to be used in the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Mrs. Paul.
I move for passage of ordinance 193 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Ms. Paul.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Ms. Paul, seconded by Mr. Slander For ordinance 193 of 2024, Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Slander?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman? Yes. Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 193 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 194 of 2024. Council, are there any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 194 of 2024 as ordinance 194 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to DR Evil Police and Fire Equipment, 3203 Woodville Road, Northwood, Ohio, for the 2025 police vehicle equipment purchase and changeovers for the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Paula.
I move for passage of ordinance 194 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mrs. Paula.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Mrs. Paula, seconded by Mr. Slander on ordinance 194 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Slander?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman? Yes. Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 194 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. We'll now move into the items we added this evening. The first item is item 195 of 2024, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian, Public Service Director Paul Roman. And with this one, Mr. Roman, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to revise the municipal code to help prevent eviction cleanups or whole house cleanouts. When even though we have unlimited refuse collection, it can become ridiculous with what is put out. And we talked about it with our renewal with Republic Services that we would also agree to provide legislation to prevent that. So code section 311.01, basically we just require property owners to follow our refuse collection rules. And those rules are attached to this ordinance. And we did add a paragraph regarding evictions and just whole house cleanup. Basically, they'll be required to get a dumpster in lieu of just putting their refuse out. We did check eviction rules. I think the state of Ohio really doesn't have a requirement where a landlord has to put their belongings out at the right of way. Some states do have those rules, but everything basically has to be placed in an appropriate container. And in most cases, we are just simply telling property owners to put their materials in a dumpster if it's a large quantity. And I think if you drive through the east side, you'll see, I saw a couple Sunday, they just look a mess. And I think it's something you don't want in the city. And I think so far we've had a couple people simply went and got the dumpster and just, there was not too much of a debate. I don't think this is gonna be a big issue. I did wanna say though, that as much as we have these rules in the background, we do wanna make them simpler, easy read, frequently asked questions. I know Cassie is working on that. We'll put that on the city website to make that simpler, but the actual rules are what's attached to this ordinance. So happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions on item 195? Hearing none, I'll assign item 195 of 2024 as ordinance 195 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
An ordinance amending Chapter 311, Street Obstructions and Special Uses by amending subsection 311.01 of the Oregon Municipal Code titled Placing Injurious Materials of Obstruction in Street and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 195 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake for ordinance 195 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman? Yes. Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Slander?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 195 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 196 of 2024, and again, we'll go to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to purchase chemicals for the water treatment plant. We do go out for bids on some of the larger purchases. And in this particular case, we have 3 particular chemicals. The bid tab, the bid review, and the listing of the lowest and best bids are included in Exhibit A. And the companies are also listed in section 1. We definitely had some increases. Lime, which is a big dollar amount, did go up 14%. Liquid aluminum sulfate went up 8%, but liquid caustic soda went down 6%. So, which is good. But in general, the costs still really aren't leveling out. They're still increasing. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council. Hearing no questions, I will assign item 196 of 2024 as ordinance 196 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to issue purchase orders to Carmus Lime Inc., River Rouge Operation, 25 Marion Avenue, River Rouge, Michigan, Chemtrade Chemicals US LLC, 90 East Halsey Road, Suite 200, Chemicals US LLC, 90 East Halsey Road, Suite 200, Parsippany, New Jersey, and Jones Chemicals Inc., JCI Inc., 18000 Payne Street, Riverview, Michigan, for 2025 water, wastewater treatment chemicals and materials bid and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Slander.
I'd like to make a motion for passage of ordinance 196 of 2024 and declare an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Slander.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Pollitt. Thank you, Ms. Pollitt. Motion by Mr. Slander, seconded by Ms. Pollitt for ordinance 196 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenbeck.
Yes. Thank you, Council. Ordinance 196 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to the last item on the agenda is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. And Chief Began, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to apply for and accept a grant for the Ohio Law Enforcement Body Armor Program, which is through the Attorney General's Office and funded by the Bureau of Workmen's Comp. This grant that we'd be applying for would have a 75% coverage of the 10 vests that we will need. And there's a 25% match. So it's around just under $11,000 in grant funding that we'd receive back for the body armor that would be ordering.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions on item 197?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
Chief Began, how often do you guys get new bulletproof vests?
Every 5 years, we have to replace those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you, Chief. Council, any additional questions on item 197? Hearing none, I will assign item 197 of 2024 as ordinance 197 of 2024. And ask Ms. Ross to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to apply for and to accept a grant from the Ohio Law Enforcement Bulletproof Vest Program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. And council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula.
I move for passage of ordinance 197 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Mrs. Paula, seconded by Mr. Slander for ordinance 197 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak.
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenbeck.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 197 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. That concludes all the agenda items we have for this evening. We do have one we'll have for further business for discussion in a moment, but we'll go to reports first, and we'll start with the mayor's report. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, some correspondence here on some retirements from the fire department. And I think many of you did go to the retirement ceremony that was on November 20th, just a couple weeks ago. And so this formally accepts the retirement resignations of these individuals. And so I will say their names and the date at which they retired. So the first is Tom Baker, November 20th, Sean Beavers, February 28th, 2025. Tom Baker's was 2024. Victor Blankenship, November 20th, 24. Josh Ellis, November 20th, 2024. Chris Marsh, December 3rd, 24. Gavin Nelson, November 20th, 2024. Rich Nelson, November 20th, 2024. Mario Rizzo, January 10th of 25, and Pat Walsh, November 20th of 24. And I'd ask council's concurrence in accepting the desires of these individuals to resign due to retirement.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula.
I move to concur with the mayor's acceptance of the retirements of Tom Baker, Sean Beavers, Victor Blankenship, Josh Ellis, Chris Marsh, Gavin Nelson, Richard Nelson, Mario Rizzo, and Pat Walsh, along with their respective effective dates.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. Any objections? Hearing none, council, the council concurs with the acceptance of the retirements as presented.
Okay, and then after with those retirements, we do have a hiring of Trenton Morrissey of 3655 Maxwell Road, Toledo, Ohio 43613. Mr. Morrissey be paid at the rate of 22.0626 for the shift work and 28.9518 for all other hours. And his effective date will be Tuesday, December 10th, 2024, and it will be accepted as a part-time firefighter to EMT in the Oregon Fire Department. And I was asked council's concurrence in the appointment, once again, of Trenton Morrissey, firefighter to EMT.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Trenton Morrissey as firefighter 2 EMT in the fire department, effective start date Tuesday, December 10th, 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, the council does concur with the appointment of Trenton Morrissey to the fire department. Mayor.
Okay, and it is my belief that next Monday, which would be the 16th, will be the last council meeting of the year. Council, you know that we have options on 5 houses on Wynn Road and 1 on Corduroy for the purchase agreement for the proposed data center. One of those options has not been renewed yet. And it has an expiration date of December 24th, 2024. If we approach that and it is denied to renew, we will be coming forward to purchase that house so that we don't fall in that awkward position of not owning one house. So we are going to put together that you would see next week's meeting, the ability to allocate funds to purchase that house if it doesn't get renewed, so that we don't lose that option. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And if there's any questions, I'm sure we can answer them right now or next week when it comes up. It is possible that it just goes and renews. It is also possible someone chooses not to renew. And then we would exercise that option.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor.
With that, I would end my report.
Okay. Councilors, are there any questions regarding the last item? Hearing none. Mayor, thank you for the report. We'll move on. Mr. Mazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as a reminder, Doug Sweeney dropped off a flyer. I don't have it with me. And Ms. Cassie, I don't know if you have a copy of it, but there should be one in the conference room right behind us. But the Wreaths Across America event is this coming Saturday, December 14th at noon. I did want to, I know I brought awareness in a weekly update, something about this a few months back. House Bill 296. That has to do with the police pension fund. The state of Ohio legislature is this is growing legs, and it looks like they're trying to carry this through for passage. But that would require the employers to pay more of the into the pension fund. So the employer share, or in our case, the city share, would go up from 19.5% to 24%. And that increase would take place over about 6 years. So until 2030 is when it would cap out. I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention because that would take effect July 1st of 2025. That would be a budget impact for the remainder of the year. So that's still walking through. I did want to say one thing because I was asked by Jen Kurtovic that Cookies with Santa is at the Maumee Bay State Park Lodge on Friday and Saturday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. both days. So it gets pretty busy. It's a really nice event, and hope to see everyone there. That's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Spalla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee, but this past weekend, it was really successful in the city of Oregon. Starting with the community Christmas at the Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society. They had roughly 600 people on Saturday, and the winners of all the trees are posted. I really want to give a huge thank you to Hank Fox and the rec department for the tree lighting ceremony, which was really, it was really good. And right now we are in the throngs of the Winter Wonder Lights contest. The map was put out today. I checked, and in a matter of 6-7 hours, it had over 14,000 engagements. So we're looking forward to getting that in the next couple of weeks. The police will be judging the outside lights again, and the fire department will be doing the trees. So looking forward to capping off this year's holiday celebration. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Spalla. Mr. Wolanzak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would just like to set an additional Finance Committee hearing or committee meeting for next Monday at 6 p.m. here in council chambers for our final budget hearing so that Mr. Mazur can go over anything final that he wants to present, and then we'll be ready for us to review and pass at next Monday's regular meeting or special meeting of council. So that's, just want to set the meeting for next week, 6 p.m. Monday here in council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolanzak. Ms. Ackerman.
Nothing from my standing committee, other than I am really excited to talk about leaving grass grow for the horned larks to nest in. So, but bird geek. I echo Ms. Paul's sentiments that the Christmas things put on by the Historical Society and the rec were wonderful. And I know Mr. Roman and Mr. Harnack and Steve can attest to the little dancers, the little kids dancing out for the tree lighting was just made my whole holiday season. I want to thank Synovus for gifting our area citizens once again with this little symphony Christmas concert this Wednesday. My sister's a devoted attendee, December 11th at the high school, and it's amazing, and it is free. So I want to thank Synovus for that. And reminder that the Oregon Health and Welfare Baskets will be, all the components will come together tomorrow. And thank you to everyone that is helping with that. And the numbers, the need is greater than ever. The number of children is higher than it's ever been. But I want to give a special shout out to Rita Soups, because they reached out to the community and came up with $700 in toy donations to add to it, because we were falling short. And those baskets will be assembled and picked up by those families also on the 11th. I think we covered, do we have any other Christmas stuff? What else we got? You covered the wreaths, the cookies. Is there anything we're missing? Okay, but everything's been wonderful holiday wise this season. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Mr. Slander.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee. I would just say ditto, everything else. But the Historical Society was absolutely outstanding. The trees were beautiful. And my girlfriend actually won one, so I had nothing to do with it, but she was pretty excited. But they were beautiful, and it was all very well attended. And the tree lighting was also absolutely beautiful. Well done, Hank. Thank you for that. Love the dancing, and thank you, Santa. Appreciate it also. So I've been a good boy, I swear. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Slander. Mr. Drake.
I have no report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. And I have nothing from my standing committee. I'd be remiss if I didn't, say the same, that it was a very Christmassy weekend in the city of Oregon. One of the items that didn't get mentioned is we also had the ribbon cutting for the residential properties part of Town Center with a toy drive and some other activities, and Santa visited there as well early in the day. Great turnout, great exposure, and just great overall. And if you have the opportunity to go through and see the homes, they really are well done. So very much appreciate everybody's comments and time with all the different things. With that, we do have some further business before council this evening. We'll go to that, and I've got just an announcement or two before we go to adjournment this night, council. So with that, Mr. Mazer, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr.
We're going to talk
President.
about TIFs.
That's right. Yeah, let's save the best for last. And don't forget, there was a breakfast at the schools too. That was the other item. Yeah. Ms. Rawson, if you could pull up the first, I guess we can just go right off the map. Not that one, nope, the middle one. There we go. Okay, so the first ordinance in your packet, so we're talking about two different TIF ordinances that are in your packet that we'll be presenting next week at the council meeting. And then also there will be a third additional TIF district that you are already aware of, that was already presented. That's the residential TIF district. So I'll just go through these one by one. So this, and this was always in the plan to have what this green area covers is in the school compensation agreement that was passed in late 2022. And this was always planned to have a TIF district established here. It's important for us to get this in place now because of the valuation changes. So we want to get this in at the end, and that way we get the most value out of it. But the TIF revenues only come in when the value of a property increases. So any of that property valuation increase, that tax revenue that's generated from that comes to the city, and then will you be able to use that to pay off the debt service or other items, infrastructure improvements that we need to do in this area. So just as a reminder on that. So this is what we call the aggregate area TIF district. So that's what the first ordinance covers. Ms. Rawson, if you go to the second one, that one, the first one, sorry. This area is in addition, so this is actually outside of the school compensation agreement. So this is what we call a non-school TIF. What this means is that the city would generate tax revenue and collect the tax revenue on any valuation increases, same as before, except the only caveat is that the schools get compensated for all the funds that they would have received anyway. So the schools in a typical property in the city of Oregon, the schools receives about 68% of the property taxes that are paid, and the rest of it goes to the a small margin goes to the city, and the remainder goes to most of the county levies. So what we would be capturing out of this is the non-school portion. So about 32% of the taxes generated from just the increased value of the properties, that tax revenue generated would then come to the city. So in this area, you'll know that there is a Waffle House that's planned in this area. And again, valuations increased. And hopefully, I saw actually just the other day some real estate signs along Wheeling. So Who knows what can happen there, but over time, these valuations and improvements will happen over time. So hopefully we can capture some of the tax revenue so that we can do some more, infrastructure work, pay off debt and some other things that are happening in this area. So those are the two different TIF districts that we're covering. And Ms. Ross, if you could, I'll do a recap here of what's existing and what's planned. So if you put the cursor down on the bottom on the orange parcel, that was the first TIF district that was created. That was, I believe, in 2022. That's what we call the apartment TIF. That's where the apartments are planned right now. By the way, as an update to everybody, we do have the updated plans from the apartment developer. So, and if you recall, there is a CRA agreement that's layered on top of this. So there is a TIF agreement or a TIF district that was created, but there's also a CRA agreement. They are receiving a 30% tax abatement. That clock already is ticking since 2022. So they're not receiving any benefit out of it by sitting on the property. So they are aware of that. So I think that's motivation for them to actually get something going there because that's beneficial for everybody. If you could go up to the 2-parcel TIF, that was the second TIF district that was created. We put that in place because there were improvements made. That's where the car wash is and the old BP gas station now turned into an S&G store. We did that to capture the value increases of those two properties. And we should be, if I'm not mistaken, receiving revenue from that starting next year from the county. So that's the second one. The third one, if you could go down to the residential TIF, that's the one that we discussed before. We did have a public hearing on that. Residential TIF districts have, they play by different rules. They're a little more cumbersome, so to speak. So we had a public hearing. You got to wait 30 days. December 16th is that end of the 30-day mark. So, or at least past that 30-day mark. So that'll be presented next week for passage, along with what's in the green area and what's in the blue area. The two bigger areas. So all three of those will be presented next week for passage. And the last thing I wanted to point out was the old Kmart property. You see that's kind of bolded out. So what the passage of the three for next week, if council approves of them, that will be all of the areas that we plan on having TIF districts in. So that should be done, except this one little caveat here. What we can do later, if we so choose, if it makes sense for us to do this, is to establish a different type of TIF district. So if you see 40B TIF in that box next to it, 40B TIF, the tax revenue that's collected from that can be used for public improvements. So, and that includes property acquisition and road work, utility work, all the other things. What a 41 TIF can do outside of public improvements is be reinvested into the property. So, and that's something that we'll have to, as we talk through the development plans with the developer, see if that's something we want to do. I, for one, will likely recommend that because that funding is something that we could use as a city to help develop the public space that's planned for that area. So, just wanted to put that out there that as of next week, if council approves of all three, that'll do it for TIF districts, except we may change that box right there in the middle where the Kmart property is for that reason. So that's all I have for the presentation on the TIF districts. I hope that's helpful, and I'll take any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mazer. Counselor, are there any questions regarding the TIF districts? You lean forward. Do you have something there?
Yes, Mr. President. I was just going to say early on, when we had estimates of what that TIF district could bring in revenues for the term of it, was conservatively estimated at $80 million. Which depending on what type of investment we had, so over 30 years, how fast we get these improvements in, that could be a real reality. And We had entertained the idea of putting a civic center in south of the Y complex where it goes back to Navarre Avenue that could feature an ice arena, and we would have to spend the money in that area somewhere so that that could actually become a reality, depending on how quickly we develop the rest of it.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Council, any questions on either of the two TIF districts or the information presented this evening? It's a quiet bunch tonight. I have one question. In the blue section up there, the non-school TIF district, noting in there that part of that, now it's yellow, you threw me off. All right. So the area to the north of that is residence. So how does that play into a non-school TIF district as a private residence as opposed to, in essence, what would be commercial property? How did?
Great question.
Yeah, what happens with that?
It's zoned, I believe it's zoned commercially. So it's, since it's on the frontage of Navarre, even though it's developed residentially. So but it's.
Schools are still made harmless?
They're
held
made whole.
full.
They're made whole.
Okay.
Schools are made whole.
Okay, that's the only question I have. Council, any additional questions? All right, here none. Mr. Mazer, thank you. We appreciate your information on that. Council, just a couple brief announcements before I do ask for a motion to adjourn. Reminder that there is no committee of the whole meeting for next week. It will be a regular meeting, which will be December 16th, Monday. I will not be here for that meeting. I will be on vacation. I will be thinking about you with warm thoughts. There will be no meeting on the holiday week of December 23rd. And Monday, December 30th is a fifth Monday, so there will be no meeting there. So basically, next week's meeting will be the last meeting of the year, barring a need for a special meeting to come up between now and then. And as council, as we turn the calendar and move into next year, we will start the year off with an organizational meeting, again, to redetermine leadership for council and committee assignments at that time, and that'll take place in January. So with that and those announcements, I'd seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Ms. Polliff. Any objections? Meeting is adjourned.